The story begins with a wide view of the vast and tranquil royal capital. Below on the city streets, an ordinary day was underway. A young woman browses the selection at a lively market stall. She shared a brief, light-hearted exchange with the vendor. However, her smile soon faltered, giving way to a look of visible concern. Suddenly, a young man carrying a backpack called out to get their attention. Someone gestured toward a small, dark shape visible high in the sky. Her eyes widened as she was overcome by a wave of disbelief and terror. A massive dragon suddenly begins its descent toward the city below. The entire market comes to a standstill as a wave of dread washes over the crowd. In an instant, the capital city was leveled to the ground. Painful cries rang out, echoing through the surrounding wreckage. The culprit finally unveils its true form, revealing itself to be a menacing black dragon. A lethal shadow now looms over the remaining survivors. The onlookers immediately recognized the creature as a demon from ancient legends. The young woman surveyed her situation, realizing that any hope for her survival had completely vanished. Amidst the chaos, a commander desperately attempts to rally the guards. The royal mages quickly mobilize to organize their counterattack. A small spark of hope began to spread among the townspeople. Letting out a collective shout, they released their magic all at once. The beast stood its ground, staring directly at the approaching attack. The blow landed squarely, triggering a brilliant explosion that momentarily obscured the scene. The survivors allowed themselves a fleeting moment of celebration. The mages could only look on, completely speechless. As the smoke clears, the dragon reveals itself to be completely unharmed. Any lingering hope the crowd held was completely extinguished. Stunned, the lead mage could do nothing but watch in complete disbelief. He shifted his strategy, transitioning from a focused attack to a solid defense. However, the dragon was already gearing up for its own strike. A massive surge of dark energy erupted from its open jaws. A single blast of the dragon's breath ripped through the mage's formation. The lead mage stood frozen, forced to witness the scene in sheer terror. He crumpled into the surrounding debris, completely overwhelmed by his loss. The agonizing cries of the injured seemed to mirror the deep despair he felt within. Separated and alone, the young child began a frantic search for her mother. In her state of panic, she could see him as nothing more than another monster. The mage was left with nothing but the stark reality of his failure. The threat of death now looms over the innocent. The dragon announced that the end of their world was finally at hand. Suddenly, a solitary hooded figure appeared out of thin air. Unexpectedly, the dragon's final strike was brought to a sudden halt. A vast magical barrier expanded, completely enclosing the city. Even the legendary beast was taken completely by surprise. A formidable new presence has just joined the fray. The enigmatic savior then invoked a manifestation of heavenly grace. A light drizzle begins to wash over the crumbling ruins. The survivors looked on as their wounds steadily began to mend. The market woman looked up, her gaze reflecting a renewed sense of hope. They watched as the lone man stood his ground against the demon. Whispers of a single name began to ripple through the crowd. The Black Emperor. They acknowledge him as the most formidable adventurer currently in existence. Their overwhelming despair quickly shifted into a thunderous roar of support for their savior. Despite the situation, the Black Emperor remains entirely composed. He began to channel his own dark energy. He set to work forging a weapon powerful enough to slay a god. In the blink of an eye, he closed the gap between them. His opening blow successfully draws blood, yet it isn't nearly enough to end the fight. Deciding it's time to stop holding back, he begins to take the situation more seriously. A massive array of dark weaponry materialized at his command. He announced that the battle would only reach its conclusion once one of them had finally fallen. The Black Emperor stared down his adversary, remaining completely unfazed. Infuriated by the mortal's defiance, the dragon let out a powerful roar. It releases yet another surge of devastating power. However, our protagonist made it clear that the same tactic wouldn't work on him a second time. Using only a single hand, he managed to hold back the impending apocalypse. He then retaliates with a powerful counterattack of his own. The relentless volley of dark magic successfully struck its target. The legendary creature let out a cry of unmistakable pain. Down below, the survivors could only look on in a state of speechless shock. Standing over the weakened dragon, he knew his victory was now guaranteed. He paused for a moment, looking out over the city he had just fought to protect. The heavy silence was instantly shattered as the crowd erupted into a deafening roar of celebration. However, the Black Emperor appeared completely unfazed by their constant praise. Now that his duty was fulfilled, he readied himself to depart. The onlookers watched closely as their savior finally began to take his leave. The market woman soon realized she never had the chance to properly thank him. The young girl he rescued gazed up at him with a look of pure admiration. Meanwhile, the focus shifts to the Adventurers Guild headquarters. A guild official rushes out to greet the hero upon their return. She caught up to him and began inquiring about the details of his quest. The surrounding adventurers looked on, their expressions reflecting a complicated mix of admiration and envy. The Black Emperor officially confirmed that the mission had been accomplished. The entire guild erupted in cheers, celebrating a victory that had once seemed impossible. The official questioned whether this had been his singular life's ambition all along. He clarified that his only motivation for doing so was to finally find a way to quit. She did a double-take, her expression one of pure bewilderment. He stated his intentions clearly, announcing his retirement from the life of an adventurer. His bold declaration left every member of the guild in stunned silence. This is to be expected, as he is one of the elite 8 who stand at the pinnacle of human strength. However, the Black Emperor suddenly disappeared, leaving his current location a complete mystery. Without a trace, the Black Emperor vanished from the world entirely. 3 years later, a young man makes his way into an unfamiliar town. He was prepared to start fresh, finally leaving the burdens of his previous life behind. He registered under the pseudonym Bran, officially entering the system as a rank 10 rookie. Standing within the local guild, he prepared to begin his journey from the lowest rank. He accepted his new identity, though he couldn't quite hide his lingering awkwardness. Offering a warm smile, the guild receptionist introduced herself. Introducing herself as Reina, she greeted him with a warm welcome to the city. He took a moment to pause and appreciate the quiet tranquility of his new home. The peaceful surroundings were a stark contrast to the hectic capital he had grown weary of. He dedicated those years to stripping away his former, more extravagant techniques. He has now become just another ordinary adventurer, blending seamlessly into the crowd. A welcoming gate guard waves, clearly pleased to see a new face. Bran expressed his gratitude to the man for helping him locate the guild. The guard explains that the town is situated on a perilous frontier. This location is rumored to be the domain of a legendary demon lord. That specific motivation was exactly what led him to choose this location. The guard wished him luck, completely unaware of the man's true identity. Now that his registration was officially complete, he set out to find his first mission. Before moving forward, he had another pressing matter that required his immediate attention. Surprisingly, he makes his way into a real estate office. A welcoming agent approached the young adventurer with a warm greeting. Bran got right to the point, stating clearly that he was looking to purchase a house. It was a peculiar request, especially considering that most adventurers typically stay in local inns. However, his master's words about what it truly means to have a home lingered in his mind. He reassured the agent that money was no concern, drawing on the wealth he had accumulated from his previous career. His only requirements for the new living space were that it be spacious and include a bath. The agent had a specific property in mind, though it was located in a rather secluded area. He guided Bran toward an inviting house situated on the outskirts of town. Upon stepping inside, Bran was immediately caught off guard by the sight before him. The agent acknowledged that the property was situated a fair distance from the city center. Bran was already fully convinced, declaring his intention to buy it right then and there. Clearly excited, the agent explained that the house had actually been sitting on the market for quite some time. Without hesitation, he offered to settle the entire balance in cash on the spot. He nonchalantly handed over a substantial bag of coins. The agent was visibly stunned by the substantial amount waiting in his retirement fund. Confused by the man's reaction, Bran began to wonder if he had inadvertently caused some trouble. Left alone in his new residence, he began to ponder the massive expense he had just incurred. Regardless, the cost is a steal compared to the massive bounty placed on the Black Dragon. Surveying his surroundings, he realized the space was far too large for just one person. He found himself at a loss, unsure of how to even begin settling into his new surroundings. He presented his freshly issued adventurer's license. A faint smile crossed his face as he finally reached the milestone of a rank 10 rookie. Meanwhile, at the guild hall, other adventurers are busy trading rumors. The group ridiculed the newcomer, skeptical of someone who had secured a high rank solely through a recommendation. The tall, cloaked figure calls out to his smaller companion. He advised his companion to disregard the meaningless chatter around them. Ultimately, they live in a world where results are the only measure of success. With that, the two mysterious adventurers made their departure. A brief flashback showcases the hooded figure's overwhelming level of power. He moved with such incredible speed that it was nearly impossible to track his actions. Meet the Black Emperor, a man famous for his flawless record of completing every mission he undertakes. The surrounding adventurers could only watch in disbelief as he rose through the ranks at an incredible pace. Meanwhile, his elven companion remained quiet, appearing deeply lost in her own thoughts. The perspective transitions to a woman gazing out a window, softly murmuring Bran's name. A flashback reveals the moment Bran's master entrusted him with one final assignment. If he could defeat the Black Dragon, he would finally be granted his freedom. Reflecting on his time as an adventurer, he contemplated the deeper significance of his master's teachings. An official from the capital arrives, presenting yet another prestigious mission for them to handle. She commended him for his perfect record, but he remained humble, insisting he was simply following his orders. A flashback reveals the young party in high spirits, celebrating the completion of a straightforward quest. The visiting official from the Capital Guild sternly reprimanded them for running through the halls. The Black Emperor questioned their identities, only to realize they were actually new rank 10 rookies. He happened to overhear them discussing their mundane responsibilities, such as the simple task of gathering herbs. He found himself questioning why an adventurer was being assigned such mundane tasks. Amused by his limited perspective, the guild official simply offered a knowing smile. At that moment, a family approached the rookies to express their gratitude for the assistance they provided. He observed this simple act of gratitude, a concept that felt more foreign to him than the idea of a day off. He began to question the actual purpose behind these repetitive chores. He witnessed firsthand how their efforts were directly contributing to the community's welfare. It finally dawns on Bran that his entire focus up until now had been centered solely on destruction. His past assignments were strictly limited to neutralizing threats, as he had never once taken a job focused on helping others. Rather than posing a genuine threat to the public, the monsters he hunted served primarily as personal trophies. Tightening his grip, he began to wonder who was truly the one wasting their time on meaningless tasks. He realized he wanted to be of service in that same straightforward and uncomplicated way. However, at the time, the guild's leadership refused to allow him to undertake any lower-ranked missions. The focus shifts to the enigmatic woman as she softly whispers his name. A sudden memory strikes Bran with unexpected force. He found himself reflecting on the final words his master had spoken to him. Motivated by the simple promise of freedom, he wondered if his master had already anticipated this would be the path he'd take. He had finally discovered a path that might bring his heart the peace it long desired. He recalled a time when he was nothing more than a hollow shell, existing only as a weapon. Having lost all his memories, the boy turned to his master to question him about his true identity. He lacked any real identity, being defined solely by his overwhelming power. Ultimately, he decided that his past no longer held any significance. He now goes by the name Bran, a simple rank 10 adventurer. He gazed at his new license, recognizing it as the official proof of his fresh start. A faint but resolute smile spread across his face. Driven by a new sense of determination, he headed out to accept his very first quest. As he made his way out, a sudden realization occurred to him. He pauses for a moment, wondering what his master is currently doing. The focus then transitions to a massive, formidable building that commands the landscape. Inside, a blonde warrior let out a sigh of visible annoyance. Directly across from her sat an official with a stern expression. Known as the Sword Saint, Kururu made it clear she wouldn't be leaving until she got the answers she came for. She urged the man to abandon his search, reminding him that 3 years had already passed. The official slams his fist down in frustration, clearly not the type of person to let things slide. He reminded her of her position as the Bran's master. He questioned why she hadn't simply dispatched another high-ranking adventurer instead. A smirk played on her lips as she recognized the true motive behind his desperation. Her remarks clearly hit a sensitive spot with the old man. Her light-hearted attitude vanishes instantly as she suddenly turns serious. A heavy, suffocating pressure suddenly permeated the entire room. The official struggled to breathe under the weight of her overwhelming aura, serving as a clear reminder that one should never argue with a sword saint. She reaffirmed her position, reminding him of her own legendary reputation. This underscored the massive power disparity between him and a rank 0 like her. She is only present because she feels bound by her sense of duty. He desperately argues that Bran is the only person they have left to depend on. She scoffed at his requests, dismissing them as nothing more than tedious chores. She disregarded his words, stepping right over the papers scattered across the floor. She remembered how they had exploited Bran, treating him as a mere tool devoid of any personal will. She explained that she had raised him with the intention of letting him discover his own purpose. He refused to let the guild's leadership use him as a mere pawn. Now he has finally discovered it for himself. She issues a firm warning for them not to meddle in his new life. The official shouted after her in desperation, pleading for her to wait. However, she firmly brought their exchange to a close, making it clear that they were finished talking. Following their exchange, the Sword Saint made her departure. She muttered to herself, clearly frustrated by what a hassle the whole situation had become. With her message finally delivered, she stepped back out into the city. Left alone, she couldn't help but wonder how Bran was faring by himself. She felt her duty to him was complete as long as he remained happy. A cunning smile spread across her face as she decided it was time to pay him a visit. Meanwhile, Bran positioned himself in front of the quest board, fully prepared to begin his journey. He quickly realized that only the least desirable jobs were still available. Monster hunting appears to be a much more popular pursuit than ordinary manual labor. The other adventurers voiced their frustration over being stuck with such mundane, low-level chores. For Bran, a straightforward quest to gather herbs served as the ideal starting point. He presented his final selection to the receptionist, Rena. She produced a peculiar box, leaving the young man visibly puzzled. A brief, uncomfortable silence lingered between them for a moment. She informed him that the quest had been officially registered to his license through magic. He requested a specimen of the herb he was tasked with gathering. Rena kindly presented a herb to him, taking a moment to explain its distinct features. However, the moment he made contact, he immediately sensed that something was wrong. A massive surge of new information suddenly rushed into his mind. He gripped his head in clear distress, drawing a worried gaze from Rena. In an instant, he gained a complete understanding of every herb's properties and uses. Brushing it off as a minor headache, he made sure to thank her for her assistance. After accepting his first official quest, Bran makes his way into the forest. Before long, he managed to catch sight of his target. He soon realized that the herb was actually growing in abundance all around him. Applying his newfound knowledge, he carefully harvested the material with expert precision. He continued with his tasks, though his mind remained preoccupied with the strange occurrence. His train of thought was suddenly broken by the appearance of a common forest slime. The beast lunges forward, expecting its target to be an effortless snack. Unfortunately, they had chosen the wrong rank 10 rookie to provoke. With a calm demeanor, he informed the puddle that it had made a mistake in choosing its opponent. Looking down, he spotted the slime's core, the definitive proof of his first successful kill. He contemplated the value of the slime core, but ultimately decided that profit wasn't his primary goal. He left it behind, finding far more contentment in the quiet task of gathering herbs. Having filled his sack, he decided he had gathered more than enough for the day. Upon his return to the city, the gate guard was visibly impressed by the massive haul he brought back. Without wasting any time, Bran made his way back to the guild to turn in his first successful quest. Rena greeted him, her face lighting up with a warm and welcoming smile. She inquired about the status of the request, and he confirmed that it had been successfully completed. He held out the sack of herbs for her to examine. She was left speechless by the massive quantity, but Bran simply admitted he had overdone it. Rena found herself puzzled by his peculiar sense of entertainment. He seems genuinely perplexed that she doesn't find the situation enjoyable. She couldn't help but let out a soft, amused chuckle. Remarking that he was quite intriguing, she stepped away to begin processing the quest items. While biding his time, Bran caught wind of some unsettling rumors circulating among the other adventurers. The group discussed the concerning reports of monsters appearing much closer to the town than they typically would. Anxiety begins to mount as the threat of the creatures breaching the city's defenses becomes an increasingly real possibility. His expression grew stern as he recalled the various rumors surrounding the Demon Lord. Rena called out his name, drawing him back from his wandering thoughts. She returned, her face beaming with unmistakable excitement. She marveled at the exceptional quality of every herb he had managed to collect. She expressed her disappointment that most adventurers overlook these essential tasks in their pursuit of fame. She noted that thanks to his help, they would finally be able to replenish their supplies. Bran found himself momentarily taken aback by the sheer sincerity of her gratitude. As he struggled to digest the information, she suddenly remembered one final detail. She offers her formal congratulations now that he has successfully completed his very first quest. She handed back his license, which was now officially updated to reflect his first success. He accepted it with a sincere smile, expressing his gratitude for her assistance. His sudden display of warmth caught Rena completely by surprise. As he made his departure, he reflected on the straightforward satisfaction of having been truly helpful. He headed home with a visible pep in his step, leaving the surrounding crowd puzzled by his sudden high spirits. He announces his plan to take on an even greater number of these straightforward tasks the following day. Having made his decision, he opted for a shortcut on his way back home. It was a route that remained strictly out of reach for the average citizen. He vaulted across the rooftops, drawing cheers of excitement from the children watching below. As he continued on his way, he noticed something unusual tucked inside a dark alley. In an instant, his seasoned adventurer's intuition took over. A sly smile spread across his face as he realized he had finally tracked them down. Nearby, a cat's ear twitched as it sensed a sudden presence. The feline loses its balance, and for a split second it begins to plummet toward the ground. In a sudden blur of motion, Bran intercepted the terrified creature mid-air. He touched down with a level of poise that seemed far beyond his status as a rookie. The cat, meanwhile, remained in a daze as it struggled to process its recent brush with death. Brand gave his cheeks a quick squeeze to confirm that this was actually happening. Instead of showing any gratitude, the small creature immediately began to fight back. Upon spotting the pink collar, he confirmed that another quest was officially complete. He couldn't help but wonder why every animal he encountered seemed to take an immediate dislike to him. This curse remains a constant shadow affecting every creature he encounters, from ferocious monsters to simple house pets. While the owner expressed their sincere thanks, Bran privately decided that pet-related missions were something he'd rather avoid from now on. The following morning, he made his way to the Merchants Guild to pick up his next assignment. Upon his arrival, he was welcomed by his client, a man named Belmo. The objective was straightforward. They had to load heavy cargo onto a series of carts. Belmo clarified that the job's meager pay and extreme danger made it a position no one else was willing to take. The majority of adventurers are drawn to the prestige that comes with hunting monsters. Although he offered an apology for the tedious work, Bran didn't seem to mind the tasks at all. Belmo gestured toward the cargo, signaling the start of their long day of labor. However, Bran effortlessly hoisted a massive stack of crates with just a single hand. The entire warehouse fell silent as everyone present watched the scene in shock. He hesitated for a second, picking up on their unusual response. He inquired if there was a specific sequence they needed to follow for the loading process. Belmo stood frozen in disbelief, his mind struggling to process the sight he had just witnessed. Belmo stammers, questioning if he's truly certain he can manage that much weight. Bran casually remarked that the weight was still quite manageable for him. The laborers were stunned by the news, as the task mentioned would typically require an entire week of their time to complete. His incredible achievement served as a source of inspiration, pushing the rest of the crew to work with even more determination. They looked on as he shifted the massive piles of cargo with effortless strength. In what seemed like mere minutes, the entire job was complete. Maintaining a calm demeanor, Bran advised the group not to overexert themselves. Refusing to be outdone, one worker puts his pride on the line to ensure he isn't overshadowed. He strained with all his might, struggling to lift even a single crate. Ultimately, his strength gives out, and the cargo crashes to the ground. In an instant, Bran moved to shield the others from the looming threat. Holding them both protectively, he checked to see if they were unharmed. He maintained a composed expression, acting as if the situation were of no concern. Clearly flustered, the young woman offered her thanks. Meanwhile, her colleague appeared to be experiencing a similar realization. He quickly regained his composure, though his pride had clearly taken a serious hit. Brand had already secured the crate, confidently reassuring the group that it was no trouble at all. He notified Belmo that the task was complete, reporting that no damage had been sustained during the process. The entire crew offered their sincere thanks, their gratitude clearly genuine and heartfelt. Belmo was taken aback by such an impressive display of power, but Branya modestly explained that he simply puts in some training. Clearly impressed by his skills, the merchant immediately offers him a permanent position. Bran found himself completely taken aback by the unexpected offer. A subtle, genuine smile spread across his face. He respectfully declined the offer, explaining that he was perfectly content with his current life as an adventurer. They assured him the invitation would remain open should he ever reconsider his decision. Having successfully completed the quest, he parted ways with his newfound companions. As he looked back on his recent assignments, he realized he was experiencing a genuine sense of fulfillment for the first time. Upon returning to the guild, Rena welcomed him with some exciting news. She offers her congratulations on his promotion, yet Bran responds with a look of pure horror. He attempts to decline, firmly insisting that he prefers to remain a rank 10 rookie indefinitely. Rina clarified that the automatic promotion was simply a standard regulation within the guild. Overwhelmed by despair, Bran collapsed as he realized his dream of becoming a rookie was officially over. He expressed deep regret over losing his rank 10 standing, leaving Rina utterly perplexed. She questioned his resistance, pointing out that rising in rank would ultimately benefit the citizens. High-ranking individuals are eligible to accept monster hunting quests dedicated to protecting the innocent. She reminded him that the core responsibility of an adventurer is to expand the boundaries of humanity's safe zones. Her words resonated deeply, leaving a profound impact on him. He had spent his entire life mindlessly following every command, never once pausing to consider the actual objective. Rina offered a smile, noting that he was still welcome to take on simpler quests if he preferred. Brand was visibly thrilled by this news, confirming that his priorities are anything but typical. Rena agreed, though she was left entirely bewildered by his reaction. She accepted his license to begin the formal paperwork for his promotion. She offered a smile as she congratulated him for reaching rank 9. Bran inspected his new card, muttering under his breath about his dissatisfaction. Accepting his new reality, he continued his journey with a little more experience under his belt. Hoping to reclaim his former life, he immediately requested another simple mission. Just then, another adventurer approached Rina to inquire about the newcomer. Beaming with joy, she announced that she had finally found a new junior to mentor. Bran was left entirely bewildered, unable to grasp the meaning behind her words. She leaned in close, letting her request linger in the air between them. Bran didn't hesitate to shut her down with a firm refusal. Reyna reprimands him, clarifying that they are fulfilling a formal guild request. With a mischievous grin, she pointed out that the entire situation was actually his fault. Reyna points out that his habit of hoarding quests is preventing other rookies from advancing their ranks. The nearly vacant quest board served as a clear testament to his relentless efficiency. Bran finally admitted that he had been intentionally steering clear of the animal quests. It was likely for the best, considering those methods are notorious for their low success rates. He realized that his simple intention to help had inadvertently created a major bottleneck. She remarked that he had never truly considered the potential drawbacks of being so virtuous. Once more, Bran was left to reflect on the unintended consequences of his decisions. Rena was quick to clarify that she wasn't complaining, noting that his work had actually been incredibly helpful. She had never encountered an adventurer who showed such genuine dedication to these low-level tasks. Consequently, she approaches him with a request of critical importance. She requested that he share his expertise and methods with the other rookies. Naturally, the guild intended to provide fair compensation for both his time and his specialized skills. Scoffing in disbelief, Brands questioned whether this supposed promotion was merely an elaborate prank. He weighed the offer, though he honestly admitted he wouldn't even know where to begin as an instructor. Recognizing that the blame lies with him, he begrudgingly agrees to help resolve the situation. The newcomer introduced herself as Arya, accompanying her name with an unexpectedly formal bow. She was delighted to find an upperclassman who shared her appreciation for straightforward quests. Bran felt a sense of relief after discovering a kindred spirit who shared his genuine appreciation for menial labor. Reyna presented their licenses, marking the formal start of their joint mission. With their objectives established, the newly formed pair made their way out of the guild hall. Their first lesson officially began with a detailed walkthrough of the rank 10 herb quests. He questioned her for information, but she confessed that her expertise was limited to a single type of herb. With a look of pride, Arya displayed her first discovery, a freshly gathered Hylia herb. Bran wasted no time pointing out her error, revealing the entire route to clarify. He demonstrated the correct way to harvest, ensuring the roots were left behind to allow for future regrowth. He even demonstrated sophisticated preservation techniques, specifically for the more fragile plants. Arya soon realized that her level of effort was likely excessive for such a common herb. Bran emphasizes that mastering these skills remains a vital investment for the future. She watched him with genuine admiration, clearly struck by the sheer level of skill he displayed. She expressed her excitement, noting that he was every bit as impressive as Rena had described. She admitted that she hadn't truly considered the lasting consequences of her gathering. She smiled, finding a sense of genuine joy in the simple and thoughtful task. Bran listened closely, sensing a deep connection in the words she shared. A genuine smile spreads across his face as he realizes he isn't alone in his way of thinking. He acknowledges that humble labor should never be looked down upon. leading her to earnestly ask for more of his guidance. He then pointed toward the next plant, which happened to be growing right at her feet. He recognized the plant as ruruku grass, a fundamental ingredient used in brewing mana potions. He clarifies that utilizing this specific herb comes with a significant drawback. Just then, his senses alerted him to a subtle disturbance nearby. A sudden rustling from the bushes caused them both to instantly go on guard. Bran scanned his surroundings, trying to identify the source of the sound. Arya, however, remains more focused on the potential side effects of the herb. Dismissing the background noise, he explained that the substance is highly toxic, if not prepared with the proper technique. Yet, from high above, a hidden presence continues to monitor their every move. Upon his return to the guild, Rina offered her congratulations for his latest promotion. He accepted his new rank 8 license, though his expression suggested he found the promotion more painful than rewarding. He scrambled to find any possible way to avoid the upcoming promotion exam. He attempted to steer the conversation elsewhere, but Rina refused to let the matter drop. Elsewhere, Arya celebrated her own achievement after successfully advancing to rank 9. Rina offered him comfort, reassuring him that his help had truly meant everything to her. She elaborated on how the mentorship program had turned out to be a resounding success. Bran recognizes that this is his perfect opportunity to leave monster quests behind for good. However, his unconventional career path eventually led others to dub him with a new nickname, the Chore Boy. The other adventurers frequently ridicule him for his habit of only accepting low-level chores. They were stunned to find that his rate of advancement far outpaced their own. They couldn't wrap their heads around his lack of drive, feeling a deep sense of envy toward his effortless success. Rina advised him to pay no mind to the rumors, though his irritation was plain to see. He let out a weary sigh, already exhausted by the lackluster reputation he had recently acquired. He accepted the new license, which served as a clear reminder of his ongoing inability to actually fail. Rina offered a parting wave from the office as he made his departure. She watched him depart, privately noting how peculiar he seemed. At that moment, a fellow guild employee snuck up behind her to give her a playful scare. The woman inquired if he was the well-known chore boy she had heard rumors about. She teased Rina, clearly amused by the way Bran silently endured the mockery. She admitted that despite his apparent lack of drive, his work proved to be a significant help. From a distance, she silently judged his unkempt hair and dejected posture. She concluded that his handsome features were being entirely wasted on someone so lacking in ambition. Visibly flustered, Rina adamantly insists that her co-worker has completely misread the situation. The entire guild went quiet as everyone paused to listen in on the scandalous rumors. With a firm slam of her hand, she made it clear that her only priority was her job, not seeking a relationship. Her friend, however, was strictly focused on marrying a wealthy and handsome adventurer. She began listing the most eligible bachelors, a gesture that clearly started to get on Rina's nerves. The fellow adventurers pressed for answers, eager to find out who had managed to catch Rina's attention. Her co-worker assumes she is striving for the elite ranks, where the competition is notoriously cutthroat. Rina panicked and quickly denied looking for anyone, making it clear she wasn't interested in finding a partner through the guild. The crowd leaned in with anticipation, urging her to at least describe her ideal type. Her friend's eyes lit up with excitement, signaling that she had no intention of letting Rina avoid the conversation. Feeling the pressure, Rina admits she would actually prefer an adventurer of a lower rank. She was quick to clarify that her concerns had nothing to do with their future potential. The adventurers whispered among themselves, unable to grasp why she would willingly choose a life of such hardship. Rina explained that their bond was far more valuable than any amount of wealth they could acquire. Her co-worker was caught off guard by such an unexpectedly heartwarming reply. Sensing a hidden layer to the situation, she began to inquire about the details regarding Rina's father. A flashback reveals the adventuring party in a state of total defeat, heavily injured and clearly pushed to their limits. Throughout her childhood, she was raised to believe her father was a hero because of the sacrifice he made. Through her tears, she confessed that she valued his life far more than any title. Her friend listened with a bittersweet smile, finally coming to understand the truth. The other guild members, however, had already lost interest in the ongoing drama. Rina smiled, noting that this was exactly why she felt no concern for the chore boy. She was left feeling slightly bewildered by her colleague's remarks. With a knowing wink, the woman remarked that Bran matched Rina's description perfectly. She boldly asserts that men lacking any sense of ambition are a poor choice. Reina simply smiled, her thoughts drifting toward Bran and her own pursuit of happiness. Meanwhile, Bran caught the sound of a familiar voice proposing that they join forces once more. Arya appeared, her expression reflecting a level of determination she had never shown before. She explains that her next mission will lead her into the treacherous demon forest. Bran took a moment to consider the idea, realizing he had never actually visited the location himself. Arya apologized for the interruption, acknowledging that her request had disturbed his work. He inquired if she was prepared to set off immediately. Instructing her to wait, he quickly rushed off to complete his current task. Arya was left in stunned silence, unable to comprehend his incredible display of speed. She found herself amazed by the sheer physical strength demanded of a Reincarnated adventurer. Faced with her own limitations, she realized she couldn't hope to match his overwhelming strength. For a brief moment, she found herself second-guessing the path she had chosen. She quickly brushed the feeling aside, refocused by her determination to grow stronger. She expressed her newfound resolve, leaving Bran visibly perplexed. He offers a bit of clumsy encouragement, which surprisingly seems to do the trick. Having completed the quest, the group finally began their journey toward the demon forest. The trail guided them deeper into the shadows of the intimidating forest. This territory was notorious for being home to exceptionally powerful and lethal creatures. Deep within, a mysterious figure picks up on a presence that shouldn't even exist. She immediately recognized the aura, despite believing its owner had passed away long ago. A massive, monstrous hand emerged, its movements clearly signaling its displeasure. A formidable entity stirs from its sleep, clearly wishing its rest had remained undisturbed. The sixth demon lord has finally been awakened from its rest. Elsewhere, Arya finds her path blocked by a colossal serpent deep within the woods. Her spell lands a direct hit, yet the creature remains largely unfazed by the impact. She stood firm, bracing herself for a serious confrontation. She delivered a forceful blow, successfully felling the creature. Watching from the sidelines, Bran was genuinely impressed by her skill. Realizing he could finally take a step back from his role as the hero, she confidently announces that her specialized training has finally yielded results. Bran points out that the forest entrance is safe enough for those of lower ranks. When he asked what drove her to become an adventurer, she began to recount her history. She recounts how her town was decimated by the Black Dragon 3 years ago. With all hope seemingly gone, the legendary Black Emperor finally revealed himself. She detailed his various feats, ranging from mending the injured to defeating the monstrous creature. Witnessing him that day sparked her own ambition to become a hero. With a bright smile, she reveals that the Black Emperor is actually her idol. Bran was left utterly stunned, unable to find the words to respond to her confession. It hadn't occurred to him that his past behavior could serve as the primary inspiration for someone else's entire life. Their brief reprieve is cut short when another forest serpent emerges, forcing them to face the danger once more. Arya was taken aback when he complimented her remarkable skill with a sword. As they continue their travels, Arya catches sight of a tree heavy with fruit. She pointed it out with excitement, but Bran's peculiar ability suddenly triggered once more. He carefully outlined the proper method for harvesting the fragile fruit. As the lesson continued, he demonstrated how to handle them properly to prevent any bruising during transport. However, his instincts suddenly picked up on a far more dangerous presence. This magical aura felt far more potent than even that of the Black Dragons. He questioned whether the figure before him was truly the demon lord mentioned in the rumors. While the scale of the power was overwhelming, he couldn't detect a single trace of hostility behind it. With nightfall approaching, he decided it was time to make his way back to town. Despite the silence, he couldn't ignore the persistent sensation that they were being watched by something unseen. The scene transitions to another day, finding our protagonist occupied with yet another mundane task. He cleared the entire orchard in a blur, displaying a level of speed and precision that defied belief. The harvest was completed with such care that every piece of fruit remained in pristine condition. The surrounding workers watched in amazement, captivated by his perfect execution. Recognizing that the tougher stems would be a hassle to handle manually, he was glad he wasn't limited to working by hand. Deeply impressed by the outstanding results, the orchard owner expressed his sincere gratitude for the incredible effort. He was even presented with an immediate offer for another full-time position. The amiable gate guard points out that he might be pushing himself a little too hard. Brand appeared genuinely bewildered by the concept of putting in too much effort. The guard reminded him that taking a moment to rest was just as important. He encouraged Bran to take a break and properly experience the town. While standing alone on the rooftop, Bran begins to realize that his work has completely consumed his life. A local merchant points out that there's much more to the town than just picking up quests. He offered the young boy a chance to sample the local specialty. A massive grilled skewer served as the ideal reward for a long day of hard work. Despite the merchant's insistence on the gravity of the situation, Bran remains completely preoccupied with his meal. He recognized that overlooking the simple charms of a new town would be a missed opportunity. With a renewed sense of determination, he decides that this will now become a permanent fixture in his new life. Amused by the interaction, the vendor decides to offer Bran another one free of charge. The others spoke up as well, confirming that Bran had also provided them with assistance. He was surprised to learn that the entire town felt a deep sense of gratitude for his efforts. They reveal that he is the reason their mundane requests are finally being completed. His efforts ensured the local apothecary was fully stocked, a milestone that hadn't been reached in years. They explained that the complimentary meal was a humble expression of their deep gratitude. Unused to such sincere and direct appreciation, Bran found himself momentarily stunned. He graciously accepted their gratitude and, naturally, didn't hesitate to take the offered skewer. It was pointed out that he could easily be pursuing much more profitable quests if he truly wished to. He realized that nothing he'd eaten in his previous life could compare to this level of flavor. He thought back to his master, realizing she was the sole reason he had ended up there in the first place. The merchant conceded that there was an undeniable sense of heroism in the life of a monster hunter. Bran remains steadfast, however, insisting that there is just as much dignity in performing menial labor. His blunt statement left both men completely at a loss for words. They regard him as a peculiar but welcome presence, reassuring Rina that she has no reason to worry. However, his high spirits were cut short when another adventurer approached him with a grievance. Before he knew it, the townspeople had gathered around him to present an abundance of gifts. Deeply moved by their unexpected generosity, he attempted to politely decline. Expressions of gratitude from the crowd echoed throughout the street. Elsewhere, a woman is seen carefully tending to the plants inside her small flower shop. Noticing Bran fumbling with his massive pile of gifts, she couldn't help but let out a laugh. She even suggested adding some flowers to the nearly impossible load he was already struggling to carry. Suddenly, a new plan began to take shape in his mind. He inquired if she had any vegetables for sale that he could plant in his own garden. She recommends a few tomato plants, noting they are the perfect choice for a beginner. She quickly ran through a list of other basic plants he could attempt to grow. A short time later, Bran appeared thoroughly spent, yet he looked back at his progress with a clear sense of satisfaction. He looked over the results of his labor, admiring the small garden that now decorated his new home. Recalling the shopkeeper's words, he discovered another small source of happiness in his new life. After wrapping up his work for the day, he finally makes his way back inside. He realized that this was the first time he'd truly allowed himself to stop and rest. He decided there was no better way to decompress than with a long, hot bath. He took a moment to appreciate this simple pleasure, a feeling that was completely foreign to him. He came to realize just how many things he had failed to notice throughout his past. A simple bath felt like a cleansing rebirth into a brand new, pristine world. With his strength fully recovered, he felt prepared to take on the tasks awaiting him the next day. Upon returning to the guild, Rina appeared to be in high spirits. Meanwhile, Bran returned to his usual routine, taking on another straightforward quest. Rina points out that Arya has already accepted a similar quest within the demon forest. She cautioned him to remain vigilant, noting that the forest was still a dangerous place. After thanking her for the warning, he resumed his journey. However, as soon as he departs, her cheerful facade quickly vanishes. The memory of her co-workers' teasing resurfaced, leaving her feeling quite flustered. Her reflections were cut short when a fellow adventurer approached her, seeking assistance. Without warning, a violent crash resounded from the guild's entrance. A wounded adventurer staggered into the room before collapsing onto the floor. The rest of the guild quickly crowded around him, all of them pressing for answers about what had occurred. Breathlessly, he alerted the group that a tyrant golem had surfaced in the forest. Rina was struck with horror, realizing that a rank 3 monster had no business being so close to the entrance. Panic quickly set in, as a creature of this magnitude had never been encountered in these lands before. The man revealed the grim reality. They weren't facing just one monster, but a total of 3. The adventurers soon realized they were completely outmatched, as their town lacked any high-ranking warriors to defend it. At that exact moment, the guildmaster suddenly burst through the doors. He promptly issued an emergency quest to deal with the threat of the Tyrant golems. He issued a command for all low-rank adventurers to keep their distance from the forest. The high-ranking members were assigned the responsibility of guarding the city walls. Rina felt a heavy sense of dread as she recognized the person who had already arrived. The other adventurers accepted the weight of their grim task, fully aware that this was the path they had chosen for themselves. As they set off, Rina could only watch them go, her heart heavy with concern. She frantically reports to the guildmaster that 2 rookies have yet to return. He remembered the straightforward fruit-gathering quest they had initially accepted. He cursed their terrible timing, frustrated that those handling chores were now caught in the crossfire. He brushes them aside, confident that they lack any genuine fighting ability. Rena recalled the sword Brand carried, noting that the blade appeared as though it had never been used. Her hands began to shake as the grim reality of the situation finally dawned on her. The guildmaster's expression tightened, his features setting into a look of grim determination. He asserted that they simply didn't have the resources available to launch a rescue. He reminded her that she was just as familiar with the rules as he was. When a crisis strikes, adventurers are expected to rely entirely on their own skills to survive. The safety of the entire community had to take precedence over the fate of any single individual. With her hope completely shattered, Rina could only manage to whisper their names. Meanwhile, deep within the woods, Bran discovers Arya's discarded sword. A short distance away, Arya sat slumped against a tree, visibly wounded and defeated. She firmly rejects the idea that her journey concludes at this point. With tears welling in her eyes, she called out for her savior, the Black Emperor. However, the only response he received was the looming shadow of a monster. The tyrannical golem loomed over her, standing as a grim embodiment of total despair. Elsewhere, Bran is still focused on his original quest. Scanning his surroundings, he realized the forest was unnervingly barren, with not a single herb in sight. He questioned whether some unknown force had completely scrubbed the entire area clean. A grim realization suddenly strikes him. He might actually fail the quest. Panicking, he refuses to let anything tarnish the dependable reputation he's worked so hard to establish. But a dark energy suddenly fills the air, snapping him out of it. The slight panic on his face quickly vanishes, replaced by a look of cold determination. He detected a surge of energy that far surpassed the strength of any rank 5 monster. While hiding in the undergrowth, he realized the information provided by the guild was long out of date. Sizing up the golem, he realized its strength was far beyond the capabilities of an average adventurer. This creature is a rank 3 tyrant golem, a monster formed from earth and dense vegetation. He soon realized that it had been siphoning the life force from the surrounding forest. Realizing this is the very thing blocking his progress, he decides to handle his most important task first. Determined to return to his tasks, he chose to settle the matter as quickly as possible. Peering through the gaps in the rocks, he suddenly caught sight of a familiar figure. Arya appeared, heavily injured and struggling to remain on her feet. Stunned, his eyes widened as he breathed out her name in a low whisper. The golem's massive hand swung down, intent on delivering a final, crushing blow. However, a sudden flash of steel parried the strike just before it could land. Bran pulled Arya close, using his own body to shield her from the monster. The creature gazed down, seeing that its assault had been completely neutralized. It released a deep, guttural roar, clearly venting its frustration. He shouted her name just as the golem's arm began to crumble. He swiftly retrieved a healing potion to assist her. The restorative liquid flows over her injuries, beginning the healing process. He felt a wave of relief, glad he'd had the foresight to carry a potion for emergencies. A quiet sob escaped Arya as she finally succumbed to the combined weight of relief and exhaustion. Bran, who usually struggled to read the room, was now left completely bewildered. As he placed a cool cloth on her forehead, he felt an unfamiliar sensation begin to stir within him. He decided to put the matter aside for now, intending to ask his master for clarification later. At the moment, however, his primary focus remains ensuring Arya reaches safety. Suddenly, his instincts flared with an urgent sense of alarm. A massive beam of energy surged forward, carving a path through the forest. As it moves forward, it leaves a trail of total devastation in its wake. Touching down safely, he began to wonder what was happening to the surrounding forest. He looked up to find that 2 additional golems had arrived to join the fight. Meanwhile, one of the opponents was already gearing up for another powerful assault. He lunged to safety just as the explosion completely leveled their position. Landing in a tree, he paused to evaluate the gravity of the impossible situation before him. Encountering 3 of them at once was a clear sign that something had gone terribly wrong. He lunges into the air, narrowly evading their synchronized strikes. He noted that they moved with a level of speed that seemed impossible for their massive size. He realized that golems shouldn't possess the intelligence required for such coordinated teamwork. A chilling realization suddenly dawned on him. It becomes clear that a hidden figure is manipulating the situation from behind the scenes. He urged Arya to hold on, assuring her that the situation would be resolved in just a moment. His features steeled with determination as he tightened his grip on his sword. Yet another beam of raw energy sliced a path through the forest. The immense pressure from the blast rips through the terrain, tearing the ground apart. From a secure vantage point, he carefully gauged the true scale of the attack. He reasoned that as long as he wasn't the one getting hit, the situation simply wasn't his concern. In one seamless motion, he effortlessly redirected the incoming energy. He touched down safely, keeping a firm and protective hold on Arya. The residual force from his parry slowly faded into the surrounding air. Though he admits he hasn't quite reached his master's level yet, he feels himself steadily closing the gap. Now that the immediate danger has passed, he begins to weigh his options for what to do next. He surveyed the pile of debris, contemplating how he would manage to clear it all away. Once they returned to the guild, Rena and the master were left in disbelief by the details of his report. The guildmaster confronted him, demanding an explanation for why he had concealed his true strength. Rena, meanwhile, is quick to offer her cheerful congratulations on his latest promotion. She explained that with so many requests coming from the nobility, he could no longer afford to take on menial work. Bran's face went pale as he realized his once perfect life was falling apart. Panic set in as he realized he had to quickly conceal the evidence of his true power. Arya witnessed the entire scene, observing the faint magical residue left behind by the blade. He realizes there's no way to completely cover his tracks. His only choice is to rely on the single power he was strictly forbidden from revealing. He let out a groan as the memory of his master's stern warning resurfaced. However, with Arya still unconscious, the truth of what happened would remain entirely hidden. He raised his hand, prepared to eliminate any trace of the evidence. He stopped in his tracks, bewildered to find that the lingering magical energy had already vanished. However, he came to a halt as the true significance of this strange phenomenon finally dawned on him. He sensed a new presence, possessing a level of power that far surpassed even the Black Dragon. An ominous presence began to radiate from deeper within the forest. Glancing down, he noticed that the 3 golems had already begun to fuse together. Right before him, they merged to form a single towering monster. Without a moment's delay, the newly formed creature launches its first assault. He lunged to the side, narrowly evading the incoming volley of energy beams. The earth burst open at the exact spot he had occupied only seconds earlier. He steeled himself, preparing for the next stage of the confrontation. He noted the creature's immense durability, finding its stubborn persistence increasingly irritating. Pivoting sharply, he readies himself to close the gap. Moving with blinding speed, he followed through with a devastating sword strike. However, his strike landed without effect, failing to leave even a single mark on the creature's core. Touching down, he immediately recognized that his opponent was in an entirely different league. He concludes that while the materials remain identical, the object's power has been significantly enhanced. The creature towered over him, appearing completely untouchable. He soon realized it was drawing on that peculiar new magic to reinforce itself. However, once he grasped the logic behind the trick, the solution became obvious. He was more than prepared to unleash the frustration building up from his failed quest. He identified the creature as the ideal target for his next move. He vaulted through the air, showcasing a level of agility that seemed physically impossible. He carefully adjusted his stance, preparing to end the fight with a single well-timed strike. Putting his full strength behind the blow, he unleashed a powerful spinning slash. The creature's core suddenly fractured, splintering into countless tiny fragments. His strategy was straightforward. To counter magic, he would simply use an even more powerful force. His inherent dark power proved to be more than sufficient for the task at hand. He lunged towards safety just as the enormous beast began to collapse. The creature's body began to disintegrate, eventually crumbling away into a pile of dust and rubble. Upon landing, he felt a wave of irritation at the mess he had just created. Ever the pragmatist, he grumbled that defeating a monster without any loot was simply a waste of his time. As the confrontation ended, Brand felt a sense of relief that the evidence had conveniently disappeared. With the unconscious Arya secured on his back, he made his way toward the safety of the city. Upon reaching the gate, the guards were visibly shocked to see the two rookies returning alive. The guildmaster's expression was completely overtaken by a look of total shock. After some time had passed, Arya gradually began to regain her senses. Waking up in a strange bed, she struggled to piece together the events that led her there. Rina entered the room, overcome with joy to find that she had finally regained consciousness. Arya's memories were fragmented, leaving her with only a vague recollection of being in the forest for a quest. Rina detailed the emergency but quickly reassured her that the crisis was now under control. Arya let out a sigh of relief, placing her full confidence in Rina's words. She inquired whether it was the guild that had arrived to save her. Rina's cheerful yet elusive response only deepened her confusion, leading her to assume the answer was a no, and leaving her to wonder what would happen next. Meanwhile, the guildmaster wept openly, completely overwhelmed by a sense of relief. He pulled Bran into a tight embrace, offering a sincere apology for ever doubting him. From the threshold, Arya and Rina looked on as the unusual scene played out. Rina reveals that beneath his cold, stoic exterior, the guildmaster actually possesses a sensitive and emotional side. Bran, however, appeared as though he just wanted the entire ordeal to finally reach its end. Rina observes him with a knowing smile, while Arya remains completely bewildered. She eventually reveals the truth. It was Bran who had brought her back safely. Arya followed up with the most pressing question, asking if he had also been the one to defeat the monster. She found it difficult to accept that a simple chore boy could actually be a formidable warrior. Rina asks her to recount every detail she can remember from the forest. Arya sketched out a map to help explain the exact order of events. She remembered the moment she was completely swarmed and overtaken by the combined force of the monsters and golems. The last thing she recalls is the golem's final strike before she lost consciousness. After hearing the details, Rina concluded that Bran must have been the one who stepped in. Arya remains adamant, claiming she has never once seen him unsheath his blade. Rina noted that the explosions from the battle were visible even from the city walls. More importantly, Arya's life-threatening injuries had been completely mended. Upon confirming her condition, she began to wonder about the identity of the mysterious person who had come to her rescue. Rina suspected that a high-ranking adventurer must have been in the vicinity. The realization hit Arya with a sudden, jarring intensity. She wondered if the enigmatic man who saved her was actually the legendary Black Emperor. Still, she closed her eyes, feeling deeply grateful to whoever had stepped in to save her life. Meanwhile, the guildmaster continues to revel in the accounts of Bran's heroic deeds. Meanwhile, he looked as though he would much rather be anywhere else. Rina and Arya could only exchange amused glances as they witnessed the peculiar spectacle. His moment of triumph is quickly interrupted as another guild member finally steps in to take action. Now that he was free, Bran was eager to return to the simplicity of his usual quests. However, Rina's apologetic smile made it clear that his expectations were not going to be met. With an investigation into the golem incident now underway, the Demon Forest has been declared a restricted area. A month has since passed, yet the investigation remains at a standstill with no new leads in sight. The closure of the forest has left the lower-ranked adventurers with no remaining quests to pursue. Rina proposed a solution to his situation, suggesting that he attempt the promotion exam. However, the instant she brings it up, Bran has already disappeared. He let out a weary sigh, clearly frustrated that the monster incident was disrupting his peaceful life. He realized that reclaiming his former life would be no easy task. Unable to ignore the town's plight, he knew he had to intervene. He aimed to support others in his own simple and straightforward way. If a monster is the source of the trouble, he intends to be the definitive solution. He hurried off, determined to safeguard the simple, chore-filled life he cherished. He leaped onto the rooftops, moving so quickly that he became a mere blur against the sky. His fluid movements reveal a level of coordination that completely defies his modest reputation. He touched down silently in the woods, pausing to ensure no one had followed him. Moving cautiously, he managed to slip past the guards patrolling the city's perimeter. He gazed out across the vast reaches of the Demon Forest. He followed the subtle, magical trail he had first detected during his encounter with the golem. He briefly weighed the option of taking flight, but ultimately chose to keep his abilities hidden. Remaining inconspicuous was proving to be a significant challenge. However, as he weighs his next move, he remains unaware that he isn't actually alone. Abandoning any attempt at stealth, he realized that his only remaining choice was to make a run for it. He set out at a steady clip, fully aware of the long journey still ahead of him. The forest blurred past him as he sprinted at the peak of human speed. However, an unexpected sight ahead forces him to come to a sudden halt. A massive creature suddenly bursts through the tree line, appearing to be in full retreat from the depths of the forest. The creature was revealed to be a rank 6 rock grizzly, appearing far outside its typical territory. Viewing him as easy prey, the creature lunged forward to strike. Bran effortlessly evaded the attack, making it clear to the beast that he had no time for such distractions. He vaulted away, quickly putting distance between himself and the creature. He gave a nonchalant wave, promising to handle the situation on his way back with effortless confidence. However, his expression revealed that he was growing weary of the constant disruptions. Before long, a massive horde of high-level monsters began to swarm him. A berserk Trent enters the battle, lashing out with branches that strike like deadly whips. Yet another tyrant golem stands in his way, blocking his advance. Landing in the middle of the destruction, he quickly realized that he was facing a massive demonic infestation. He began to suspect that the guild might be completely oblivious to the reality of their surroundings. Finding himself completely surrounded, he noted that surviving such a situation would be impossible for any ordinary adventurer. Instead, a look of calm understanding settled across his face. The relentless combat serves as a stark reminder of the punishing training he once endured under his master. A memory surfaces of the sword saint, Karuru, screaming his name. She scolded him for allowing his guard to drop, even for a single moment. The young boy watched in terror as the monster steadily closed the distance. The lesson his master instilled in him was simple. Any sign of hesitation would result in death. Returning to the present, he considers the weight of those grueling but essential lessons. As he pressed forward, he reflected on how her training methods were far from suitable for a child. At last, he spotted an opening through the thick canopy overhead. He quickened his stride, grumbling about the forest's massive scale. He recalled Rena's warning that it could take several days to resolve the situation. Recalling the guildmaster's emotional embrace, he felt even more determined to bring this matter to a swift conclusion. Finally, he reached the source, the magical core at the very heart of the demon forest. He recalled the tyrant golem's strength, yet he sensed that this was a completely different kind of power. His expression sharpened as he realized he had finally pinpointed the source. Standing before the massive botanical structure, he called out to the presence hidden within. A long-haired stranger began to stir from deep within the dense greenery. He remarks that after a 3-day trek, the least they can do is reveal themselves. His patience was visibly wearing thin, as the visiting demon lords showed a complete disregard for their scheduled appointments. Without warning, a surge of lethal, jagged vines burst forth from beneath the earth. He vaults into the air, clearing the sudden strike with ease. A confident smirk spread across his face, as this situation was much more suited to his style. Finally stepping into view, the figure remarked on his impressive reflexes. Sensing his distinct aura, she finally confirmed that he was the person she had been waiting for. Puzzled, she couldn't comprehend how an ordinary human could project such a powerful aura. Maintaining his composure, he confirmed that he was indeed a human. He questioned whether she was truly the demon lord, noting that her aura felt remarkably human. He recognized the presence as belonging to the 6th demon lord. The mention of a 6th caught him completely off guard, as he had never heard of another one existing. Equally perplexed, she noted that her teachings had always maintained there were only 5 in existence. She gripped her head in exasperation, clearly preferring the order of diplomacy over such a chaotic situation. She kept her eyes locked on the boy standing directly in front of her. He found himself questioning why a being as powerful as a demon lord would need to rely on golems as weapons. This maneuver seemed surprisingly unrefined for someone with her alleged level of power. Admitting his total confusion, he asked her to clarify exactly what she meant. She explained that the former 6th demon lord was quite different from the others of his rank. It was a mindless entity, driven solely by an impulse for hatred and destruction. Determined to uncover the truth, she decided to verify her suspicions firsthand. Without warning, a mass of dark, monstrous tendrils burst forth from behind her. He drew his blade, realizing that her way of confirming things was far from friendly. He was instantly surrounded, forced to hold his ground against a barrage of continuous strikes. He recognizes that a single blade won't be enough to withstand such a relentless assault. He leaped back, resolving to match her silence with his own. She began to question whether every demon was truly destined to be an enemy of humanity. Bran fended off the relentless assault with a rapid succession of sword strikes. With a weary sigh, he finally accepted that he was out of options. Tightening his grip on the hilt, he readied himself to take the fight seriously. The Demon Lord was caught completely off guard by the sudden fluctuation in his power. He released a formidable surge of his own dark energy. She noted that even after 3 years, his progress remained completely stagnant. Knowing his master would never approve, Bran unleashed his forbidden arsenal, signaling the definitive end of his peaceful existence. He launched a lethal volley of spears specifically designed to strike down gods. Finding himself completely unobserved, he finally decided to stop holding back and reveal his true strength. He paused, clearly thrown off by her lack of a reaction. She points out that his magic is nothing more than a weak imitation of the true sixth. Her gaze sharpened as she demanded to know his true identity. The earth suddenly shatters as an even more devastating assault surges from below. Bran shouted back, retorting that he could ask her the exact same thing. He demanded answers, warning her that the confrontation would only escalate if she remained silent. Recognizing that her strength has its limits, he focused on finding a single opening to exploit. Seeing an opening, he locked his sights on her from across the battlefield. Realizing there was no other way, the Demon Lord resolved to bring the conflict to a definitive end. A massive surge of monstrous vines suddenly bursts forth from the ground. Bran was left in awe as he witnessed the staggering scale of her attack. Raising a single hand, he quickly conjured a formidable magical barrier. The Demon Lord watched the scene unfold, wearing a confident and playful smirk. However, even his absolute defense begins to buckle under the mounting pressure. His shield shatters under the force of the vines, sending him reeling backward. He struggles to break free, but the demonic plants have him completely immobilized. From her vantage point behind the barrier, she watched as her trap finally snapped shut. Thick vines coiled around his body, effectively sealing him within a massive living prison. With her spell finally finished, she stood before the massive tree. Sporting a triumphant smile, she announced that he had finally been cornered. She then inquired if her brief display had finally provided the answers he was looking for. However, the sound of splintering wood suddenly echoed from deep within the prison. He cut through the thick vines, a clear gesture of his refusal to submit. Bran tightened his grip on his sword, refusing to concede the battle. He soon realized that his blade had barely managed to leave a visible mark. He remembered how this very blade was the one used to strike down the Tyrant golem. Narrowing his eyes, he realized that this prison was far more formidable than he had first thought. Feeling the intensity of her power, he realized she had channeled every bit of her energy into this single spell. Deciding to meet force with force, he prepared to counter his opponent's spells with his own magic. He asserts that when it comes to sheer strength, he stands unrivaled. A dark sigil began to form, spinning rapidly while surging with immense energy. The energy compresses into a violent, swirling vortex of destruction. Stealing his resolve, he immediately launched a counteroffensive. A violent surge of dark energy suddenly erupted from his location, radiating outward. He stood frozen, forced to watch the events transpire in total disbelief. The massive tree prison remained perfectly intact, showing no signs of damage. He let out a short laugh, bewildered that his strike hadn't left a single mark. The Demon Lord points out that all of his efforts are ultimately in vain. She reveals that this is the exact same magic used to seal away the original sixth. Bran's expression stiffened, showing just how tired he was of hearing that title. Unable to hold back any longer, he tightened his fist as his frustration finally reached its breaking point. As his stomach rumbled, his mind became fixated on getting back home for a snack. As his options began to fade, he turned his gaze toward the sky. Reflecting on his master, he understood exactly what his next move had to be. Facing a demon lord meant he could no longer afford to restrain his true power. He gripped his chest, bracing himself to finally unleash his true strength. The demon lord was visibly taken aback by the sudden turn of events. She demanded an explanation for the nature of this formidable new power. Bran clarifies that utilizing this technique comes at the cost of extreme exhaustion. The prospect of another 3-day trek back home was simply exhausting to contemplate. A pillar of pure, unholy darkness surged forth from his hand. Drawing from the depths of the abyss, he forged a formidable weapon known as the Spear of the End. As he harnesses the energy, the overwhelming heat begins to scorch his skin. A single thrust of the spear was all it took to puncture the supposedly unbreachable prison. The demon lord could only look on as her confidence was completely shattered. Bran forces his way out, shredding the demonic vines from the inside. She questions if he's reached his limit, but the battle is clearly far from finished. He pulled himself from the wreckage, announcing that he had finally managed to escape. However, the sheer magnitude of this power has clearly begun to take a heavy toll on his body. He realized that pushing himself any further would lead to a disastrous outcome. Capitalizing on that brief moment of vulnerability, the demon lord quickly closed the gap. By the time he noticed his mistake, he realized he had left himself completely vulnerable. She pointed toward his chest, uncovering a reality that shouldn't have been possible. He carries the heart of the sixth demon lord within his body. The demon lord chuckled, clearly finding the unexpected revelation quite entertaining. In an instant, she multiplied and completely surrounded the stunned boy. Never having crossed paths with this demon before, Bran demanded an explanation. He pointed out that she was the one who had initially labeled the sixth as an enemy. She clarified that the threat was a common enemy to everyone, rather than a danger exclusive to humanity. It had become a danger to the entire world, threatening everyone from the gods to the demons. Although she insists she never meant to kill him, he remains skeptical after her recent attempt to transform him into a houseplant. He openly admitted that his own past remained a complete mystery to him. He tightened his fist, his determination visibly strengthening. He reasons that if his master never mentioned the matter, then it wasn't a concern. He brushed off the startling revelation, treating it as if it were entirely inconsequential. His primary concern was determining whether she posed a genuine threat to the new life he had established. The demon lord's expression shifted into a cunning and knowing smirk. She let out a laugh, clearly entertained by his strange sense of priority. She reassured him that she had no intention of causing trouble for him or the rest of the town. She clarified that she only retaliates when provoked, signaling that their battle was finally over. She playfully taunted him, claiming she could end him whenever she wished. Bran listened with keen focus, his expression remaining entirely neutral. She explains that her power is vast enough to wipe an entire kingdom off the map. He confronted her, seeking to confirm if she was the one responsible for the recent monster uprising. She admitted that while his aura had piqued her curiosity, she now realized he posed no threat. Unlike the original sixth, he seems to find genuine satisfaction in living a peaceful life. She pointed out that he had remained strictly on the defensive, never once attempting to launch an attack. She found this trait endearing, as it resonated with her own preference for a quiet life. Bran pondered whether any other demon lord would have been quite as understanding. A vision manifested of Lilith, the first demon lord and sovereign ruler of both dragons and beasts. The current lord chuckles, explaining that Lilith harbors an intense hatred for the sixth. Bran finally came to the realization that the Black Dragon had once been one of her subordinates. He pressed her for details regarding the original sixth, but she refused to even acknowledge the subject. Her terrified silence spoke volumes, leaving him completely stunned as the implications finally sank in. With a cheerful shift in the conversation, she finally asked him for his name. She invited him to return and play whenever he liked, but he rejected the offer without a second thought. He set off on a 3-day journey, finally making his way back to his quiet life. Though he desired nothing more than a quiet life of chores, he is constantly pulled into world-threatening catastrophes. As he continued his journey, he found himself longing for a hot soak and the simple pleasure of his new vegetable garden. Upon his return to the guild, Reyna and Arya were there to welcome him back safely. They clarified that the forest has finally settled, meaning adventuring quests have officially resumed. Bran, however, announces he's taking the day off to enjoy a much-needed bath. Caught by surprise, the girls mentioned that the local hot springs were now open. They were taken aback to learn that he had never actually been there before. They offered to guide him, their faces bright with welcoming smiles. The scene shifts to the town's grand and welcoming bathhouse. Bran settled into the hot water, letting a feeling of pure bliss wash over him. He finds the places packed with familiar faces from around town. His companions teased him lightheartedly, clearly glad to see him finally taking a moment to unwind. He concluded that while he still preferred his own bath, this one was proving to be quite enjoyable as well. In a display of genuine camaraderie, the men offered to help wash his back. Meanwhile, Reyna and Arya noticed the loud commotion echoing from the men's bath. Bran was eventually pulled from the water, having nearly drifted into unconsciousness from being a bit too relaxed. Meanwhile, a massive creature begins to stir within the city's darkened corners. He remained completely oblivious to the dark plot taking shape within his new home. A mysterious figure stood before the imprisoned creature, signaling the arrival of a new threat. Deep within the black forest, a familiar face is seen diligently working. The sword, Saint Kururu, was single-handedly managing a quest intended for an entire party. She let out a heavy sigh, her irritation evident as she dealt with the relentless demands on her time. She only accepted the arrangement to ensure the guild wouldn't hunt Bran down. She warned the guild official that losing her would be a catastrophic blow to their organization. Recognizing that she has no other real choice, she ultimately resigns herself to her new responsibilities. She returned to her silent home, which she kept meticulously prepared for the day he would finally come back. A memory resurfaces of a younger Bran sharing his newfound dream with her. He longed to find a purpose for his existence that reached beyond his role as a mere weapon. Kururu listened with focused attention, though her expression remained entirely neutral. Pulling him into a close embrace, she offered comfort and reassured him that everything would be fine. Returning to the present, she smiles while wondering exactly how much he has grown. However, she remains concerned that he isn't yet emotionally equipped to face the world. She recalled the dire condition he was in when she first discovered him. Her thoughts are interrupted by a new report on her desk. The narrative exposes a sinister organization dedicated to the creation of human-demon hybrids. Scanning the group of captives, she spotted a familiar, traumatized child. An official instructs her to disregard the compliments and maintain her focus on their next target. In another location, the organization's malevolent leader broke into a cold laugh. He stood before Kururu, mockingly presenting his latest creation to her. He presented a young boy, introducing him as their ultimate weapon. Kururu let out a scoff, dismissively viewing his own masterpiece as nothing more than a child. However, her cold composure quickly fades when the boy pleads for her help. Issuing the command, the leader unleashed his weapon directly at her. The boy struck with such overwhelming force that even the sword saint was caught completely off guard. He stood alone, acting as a vessel for an overwhelming surge of dark magic. Kururu stood his ground, facing him from across a massive chasm of fire and ruin. Despite his immense strength, his vacant gaze reveals he is nothing more than a pawn in a war he cannot comprehend. The villainous leader looked on with a distorted grin, clearly satisfied with his living weapon's performance. Kururu tightened her grip on her sword, the overwhelming power behind the boy's strikes vibrating through her entire body. The clash intensifies, turning into a frantic blur of swinging blades and shifting shadows. Moving with incredible speed, she searched for a single opening amidst his continuous onslaught. Understanding that holding back was no longer an option, she realized the child possessed a level of strength she had never anticipated. For a brief moment, her expression betrayed a hint of hesitation. The boy cried out in despair, wondering what kind of future could possibly await a monster like him. Severely wounded and broken, he reached out, appearing as a vulnerable child beneath the weight of the demonic power. In that instant, Kururu realized he wasn't looking at a weapon, but at a victim. She understood that, in the end, she lacked the resolve to actually destroy him. Driven by her newfound determination, she stepped forward to close the gap between them. She reached out her hand, intending to rescue him rather than strike him. She firmly refused to let a child's future be sacrificed to satisfy a madman's ambition. Completely drained of energy, he collapsed to the ground, bewildered by the unexpected display of mercy. Kururu stood over him, marking the definitive end of their battle. A soft, gentle smile began to spread across her face. Gazing down at the battered boy, she reassured him that he was finally out of harm's way. She took him into her arms, offering him a chance at a fresh start. He embraced a fresh start, finally distancing himself from the suffering of his past. As the vision faded, Kururu reflected on the fact that she could only show him the world through her own experiences. She smiled, finding comfort in the knowledge that as long as he stayed true to his heart, nothing else really mattered. She wondered about his progress, hoping he'd have plenty of stories to share once he returned. Elsewhere in town, Bran strolled along, humming a light-hearted tune with a bright smile on his face. Scanning the quest board, he was delighted to find that plenty of straightforward tasks were available once again. His brief moment of cheer was interrupted by an annoyed grunt echoing from behind him. A nearby adventurer shot him a sharp glare, openly mocking the chore boy for his apparent cowardice. The adventurer shoved past him, his aggressive actions making it clear he was looking for a confrontation. He asserts that he is nothing like Bran, pledging instead to become a genuine hero. To finally secure his promotion, he insisted on being assigned a rank 8 quest. Rena tries to placate him with a strained professional smile. but he complains that only low-level jobs are left on the board. Joining the conversation, the other adventurers suggested taking on tasks in the now notorious Demon Forest. The boisterous crowd quickly proves to be more than Rina can handle. Just then, the guildmaster arrived to confirm that the forest was finally safe. With the restrictions formally lifted, the entire guild erupted into a roar of celebration. The ambitious adventurer was eager to dive in, but the master cautioned them to keep their guard up. From across the room, the guildmaster caught Rina's eye and offered her a subtle, knowing look. An unspoken command was issued to ensure the situation remained stable. The adventurer presses for his mission, and Rina eventually gives in, albeit with some hesitation. Surprisingly, the only rank 8 quest available turned out to be a simple fruit-gathering mission. He requested a monster hunting quest, but Rina stood her ground, insisting he accept whatever work was currently available. Unfazed by the situation, Bran calmly submitted his quest slip, clearly focused only on getting to work. Annoyed by his rival's blatant indifference, the other adventurer met his gaze with a sharp glare. He ventured into the forest, muttering in frustration over the tedious chore he had been assigned. He reminded himself that this opportunity was his best chance to finally climb the ranks. He came to a halt, suddenly realizing he didn't even know what he was supposed to be looking for. Frustrated by his inability to find the specific fruit, he let out a loud shout. He searched frantically, realizing that he could no longer rely on pretense to get by. His prospects for a swift promotion were rapidly starting to slip away. He reasoned that the more accessible areas had likely already been thoroughly scavenged. He decided to press forward, venturing deeper past the limits of the designated safe zone. Disregarding the clear warning, he stepped right over the rope. Even after venturing deeper into the forest, his search continued to yield no results. He remained entirely oblivious to the danger closing in from right behind him. A colossal toad-like beast suddenly lashed out with its powerful tongue. The adventurer could only let out a pained cry as the blow found its mark. He stood frozen, gazing upward in a state of sheer terror. The creature, a frenzied frog, took its time savoring its effortless meal. Undeterred, the adventurer pushes himself back up, confident that he can still defeat the creature. Releasing a shout of defiance, he rushed headlong into the heat of the battle. However, the creature immediately retaliates with a heavy counterattack of its own. He was left stunned, completely unprepared for such an unexpected display of strength. He found himself puzzled as to why his strikes were failing to have any impact. Unfortunately, his real struggles were only just beginning to unfold. An even more lethal presence has emerged, casting a dark shadow across the battlefield. A massive claw swings down, striking with overwhelming power. He was sent flying, crashing violently through the dense underbrush. The brutal impact left him severely injured and physically incapacitated. He collapsed against a tree, his body finally reaching its absolute limit. His reckless ambition has finally caught up with him, leaving him teetering on the edge of death. A rank 6 assassin snake now towered over its latest target. Although he knew he needed to escape, his body remained rooted to the spot, paralyzed by fear. The creature began charging its energy, preparing to fire one last lethal blast. A sudden burst of shadows intervened, intercepting the attack in an instant. A spray of dark liquid rained down, drenching the forest floor. The giant serpent slumped to the ground, its life ending in an instant. Left standing in the wake of the chaos, he was completely bewildered by the turn of events. He found it difficult to process whether he had truly just been rescued. However, he quickly brushed the thought aside, dismissing it as an impossibility. He dismissed the incident as a fluke, rationalizing that there was no one else around to account for it. However, he remains entirely oblivious to the formidable presence currently observing him. His facade of confidence finally crumbles, and he breaks down, desperate to return home. At that moment, a recognizable figure emerged from the darkness. Bran calmly checked on his condition, his expression remaining entirely unreadable. He promptly administered a healing potion, demonstrating that a good bedside manner was actually one of his strengths. Bran asks if he's still injured, seemingly oblivious to the social cues around him. Left in a state of total bewilderment, the adventurer could do nothing but stammer as he tried to process the situation. He looked down at his body, noticing that his injuries had been completely healed. Despite being certain his bones were shattered, the potion mended his injuries in an instant. He understood that an item of such rarity and value was far beyond what a low ranker should typically possess. Bran asks if the potion was simply old, showing he has completely failed to grasp the situation. The adventurer seized him, demanding an explanation for why he had wasted such a valuable resource on him. Bran's explanation was straightforward, noting that the man appeared to be on the verge of death. In a state of panic, he explains that the potion's value is far beyond anything he could ever afford to repay. Bran dismissed the concern, explaining that he had simply used it of his own volition. A sense of humility washed over the adventurer as he reflected on the way he had once ridiculed Bran. Bran simply smiled, revealing that he actually took a liking to the nickname Chore Boy. As the lesson drew to a close, he informed the young man that it was time to head back. He shared several tips on how to use the surrounding vegetation to navigate the dense forest. Caught off guard, the adventurer questioned how Bran had managed to uncover the details of his quest. He soon realized the guild had only assigned Bran to supervise him, fully expecting him to fail. His sense of pride had been thoroughly dismantled. Bran's following words proved even more painful as he brought up the topic of his ailing mother. He clarified that the fruit was a vital ingredient for the medicine she required. He presented it, explaining that the common folk suffer when even the simplest tasks go unfinished. Stunned into silence, the adventurer found his entire perception of the world fundamentally changed. Satisfied that his point had been made, Bran turned to take his leave. The adventurer clarified that the guild's intentions weren't to mock him. Rhaena felt a sense of worry as she watched him struggle to shoulder the responsibility of supporting his family all by himself. He soon realized that he needed to shift his focus toward what actually mattered. He gripped the fruit tightly, a stark reminder of the error that had nearly cost him his life. Overcome by a profound sense of relief and gratitude, he finally broke down in tears. Bran observed the scene, his expression remaining as stoic as ever. He then offhandedly remarked that the snake's remains could likely be sold for a decent profit. The adventurer was left baffled when the snake suddenly dropped dead without warning. Bran simply shrugged, noting that they needed to report the situation to the guild. The adventurer protested, arguing that Bran shouldn't be allowed to claim sole credit for the kill. He accused Bran of cheating, but the boy was left entirely bewildered by the allegation. There was no mistaking it. The massive serpent was completely lifeless. Bran shouldered the exhausted adventurer and made the long trek back to the safety of the town. He attempted to turn down his portion of the reward for the snake. Bran, however, remained adamant that he hadn't done anything to merit such a reward. Utterly baffled, the adventurer could only conclude that he was a complete weirdo. He gripped the pouch of coins tightly, an unlikely gift from his rival. Hoping to express his gratitude properly, the merchant asked Bran for his name. The adventurer interjected, noting that he only recognized him as the chore boy. He insisted on learning the identity of the man who had just saved his life. He then offered a sincere, though clearly flustered, apology for his past behavior. A subtle, knowing smile played across Bran's face. He finally revealed his identity, catching the adventurer completely off guard. Gripping him tightly, the man repeatedly uttered the name Bran in a state of utter disbelief. Introducing himself as Godgir, he gave his word that he would eventually repay the debt. Bran watched him walk away, noting that the man was far more dutiful than he had anticipated. After returning to the guild, he assured Rhaena that he had no involvement in the recent incident. Rhaena shoots him a knowing glance, signaling that she isn't falling for his story. Bran flashed a satisfied smile, clearly proud to have recruited someone else for the tedious chores. Rhaena's co-worker playfully teased that they might need a new system to manage the growing number of chore enthusiasts. With those matters resolved, Bran made his way back to the quest board. Having finalized his next objective, he set out with a clear sense of resolve. His latest objective leads him deep into the city's more dangerous and shadowed districts. He took on a mission to patrol the city's sprawling sewer network. Despite the darkness, he simply used magic to enhance his vision. He observed the other adventurers grumbling about the foul stench and the surrounding filth. In the distance, a dark and foreboding tunnel came into view. This was meant to be a routine patrol, provided no unexpected complications arose. However, Bran's expression makes it clear he already senses something is about to unfold. He observed that these neglected areas were now completely overrun by monsters. He finally understood why everyone else avoided taking on such an inefficient quest. As it turned out, facing a massive swarm of monstrous rats was a task perfectly suited to his abilities. He was instantly repulsed by the physical consistency of his work. He identified the creatures as dust mice, noting that while they were physically weak, they reproduced at a rapid pace. He found himself questioning how creatures from the demon forest had managed to infiltrate the area. He resolved to eliminate the infestation before the situation could escalate any further. Surveying the massive heap of defeated rats, he took a moment to appreciate his successful handiwork. His next priority was determining the best way to dispose of the evidence. He couldn't afford to be identified as a monster hunter once again. However, he soon realized that one of the creatures stood out due to its unusual color. He began to wonder if these changes were a mutation or the warning signs of a dangerous disease. He weighed the option of using his own magic, but quickly realized its power was far too destructive for the situation. A vision of the 6 demon lords suddenly flashed through his mind. He let out a weary sigh, clearly frustrated by the never-ending series of setbacks. He desires nothing more than a quiet existence spent performing humble, manual tasks. Letting out a frustrated grunt, he decided to take the gamble. His intention was simply to be of use, not to become the city's hidden guardian. He reached out, summoning the dark energy he had grown accustomed to. He cautiously incinerates the evidence, hoping to leave no trace for anyone to discover. Within moments, the bodies were completely incinerated, leaving nothing but ash behind. He soon realized that the mutated creatures were all dwelling within the deeper sections of the tunnels. His expression turned grim as he realized this infestation was far from accidental. He resumed his patrol, now maintaining a heightened state of vigilance. He suddenly detected an unfamiliar presence lurking just around the corner. A recognizable sense of unease lingered, though it had been expertly hidden from view. He soon encounters a magical barrier that brings his progress to a halt. He reached out, realizing that this was a vital piece of his investigation. With a single effortless push, he shattered the formidable illusion. After crossing the barrier, he discovered a concealed door. The barrier's unexpected resilience caught him completely off guard. He observed that the ward was exceptionally powerful. It had been there for a long time, completely evading everyone's notice. He pondered what secrets might be concealed behind it. He pushed against the heavy door, causing it to swing open. His features set with grim resolve as he ventured into the unfamiliar territory ahead. He soon discovered that he was standing in the middle of a massive, concealed laboratory. The room was in complete disarray, overflowing with a chaotic collection of research notes and ongoing experiments. He soon realized that this was the true origin of the mysterious presence he had been sensing. It appeared he had discovered the exact location where the mutated dust mice had made their escape. It was evident that someone had been conducting disturbing research within these walls. He picked up the document, attempting to piece together the situation. He discovered a mysterious crest, one that appeared completely foreign to him. However, the instant he made contact, a sharp, piercing pain shot through him. The sensation was identical to his strange ability, yet no information accompanied it. He soon concluded that the crest itself was the actual source of his pain. He set out to gather all the documents to serve as evidence. However, his investigation is abruptly cut short by an unexpected development. Suddenly, an overwhelming surge of power erupted from within one of the cages. He quickly pivoted to confront the sudden and unexpected danger. The blast incinerated the evidence he had just gathered, effectively putting an end to any hopes of a clean investigation. A grim look settled on his face as his remaining patience finally began to run out. Unsheathing his blade, he prepared to bring the confrontation to a swift conclusion. A massive king beast revealed itself as it stepped out from the darkness. With a single powerful swipe, the creature completely shattered its cage. Now unrestrained, the creature radiated a clear and intense fury. However, he quickly realized that the creature was far from a natural beast. The creature was a disturbing sight, appearing as a monstrous blend of several different species. He identified the creature as a chimera, a being whose very existence was strictly forbidden. This monster was a creature brought to life by the most sinister ambitions of mankind. Brand braced himself as the chimera unleashed a powerful surge of energy. To his horror, he realizes that human remains were used in its construction. His expression grew stern, making it clear that this was an act he could never overlook. The misshapen creature's body contorted as it writhed in visible agony. It releases a devastating breath attack, aiming to bring the battle to a swift conclusion. Brand deflected the blast, spinning his sword with a level of precision that seemed nearly impossible. Stunned by his sudden defiance, the chimera's eyes widened in disbelief. Brand was caught off guard when the creature suddenly released a strange, throaty cry. A thick cloud of poisonous gas surged from the monster's open mouth. He grasped at his neck, already feeling the lethal effects of the toxin take hold. The other captive beasts shrieked in fear as the suffocating fumes began to spread. He quickly realized the gas was a lethal neurotoxin, making his current situation far from ideal. The chimera wears a smug smirk, fully convinced that its victory is now guaranteed. With poison racing through his veins, Brand struggled to keep his footing. Remaining unfazed, He informed the creature that its poison was completely ineffective against him. He delivered a single, precise cut, bringing a swift end to the creature's pain. He stood in the wreckage of the battlefield, finally finding a moment of silence now that the conflict had come to an end. As he made his way through the rubble, he grumbled that his heightened senses felt like nothing more than a curse. He reached down to retrieve a scorched fragment of the evidence he had previously gathered. He realized that a shadowy organization was responsible for orchestrating these twisted experiments. He thought back to his master's words, reminding him to place his trust in her. For now, his immediate concern was managing the evidence left behind by the fight. Aware of the lab owner's immense power, he realized that any use of his magic would be immediately detected. He realized that by employing a different form of magic, he could effectively hide his trail. A sly grin spread across his face as he leaned into his natural talent for deception. Leaving the laboratory to burn, he marked his patrol quest as officially complete. Meanwhile, a scream of absolute fury echoes from another location. Upon returning to the facility, the owner discovered that his life's work had been reduced to nothing but ash. He found it hard to believe that a simple adventurer had actually managed to break through his barrier. He was left stunned, realizing his opponent had managed to defeat the Chimera without relying on any magic. He grew frustrated, realizing that the Sword Saint had effectively dismantled everything he had worked so hard to achieve. Driven by a boiling rage, he refused to forgive the intrusion. Opening a dark gateway, he summoned a creature from a vault in another dimension. He asserted that anyone who dared to meddle in his organization's affairs would not escape unpunished. Flashing a menacing grin, he vowed to track down the person responsible. Returning to the guild, Bran asked Rena if he was allowed to accept a quest from a small monkey. The focus moves to a barren mountain, where a beast made of pure lightning roams the desolate peaks. Caught in an assault, it fended off a relentless flurry of enchanted daggers. Just then, a new adventurer arrived, mocking the creature for finally being backed into a corner. A fierce and confident smile spread across her face. Introducing herself as Regina, she announced that their long-running game of tag had finally come to an end. This creature is the Holy Thunder Beast, a legendary monster of the first rank. Regina simply scoffs, remaining completely unfazed by the warnings. Meanwhile, others began to worry that her decision to face the challenge solo was far too reckless. She simply laughed and told them to stay calm, fully aware of her own capabilities. Knocked to the ground during the fight, she finally conceded that she couldn't achieve victory on her own. The beast loomed over her, its body crackling with a surge of immense power. Regina gazed upward, seemingly resigned to her defeat. Even through the blood, a grin of fierce determination spreads across her face. She repeatedly forced herself back up, refusing to stay down as the battle continued. The creature begins to stumble, its stamina clearly reaching its limit as the fight drags on. Regina's frame now surged with the energy of the lightning she had seized. As the energy surged through her, it became clear that her risky gamble was finally paying off. By absorbing the beast's essence, she grows significantly more powerful with every passing second. She observed that its strength was every bit as impressive as she had anticipated. Utilizing her enhanced abilities, she quickly closed the gap to deliver the finishing strike. She asserts that after all this time, she has finally become the more powerful of the two. With just a single swing, she releases a powerful wave of energy. She expressed her gratitude to the creature for the 4 years of training it had provided her. She delivered a final, decisive blow, effectively ending their long-standing and violent feud. The intensity of the confrontation had finally caught up to Regina, leaving her completely spent. Instead, she unleashed a powerful roar, celebrating her absolute triumph. Exhausted from the grueling struggle, she slumped to the ground, feeling a sense of peace with her hard-earned victory. She wore a triumphant smile, noting that she was now one step closer to reaching that person. Upon returning to the guild, she was greeted by news that seemed almost impossible to believe. An official statement soon confirmed that the Black Emperor had indeed retired. His absence has resulted in a significant backlog of uncompleted high-level quests. The official was simply glad that Regina's return finally allowed them the chance to catch up. Regina, however, was clearly struggling to process the news. She pledged to hunt down the Black Emperor regardless of where he might be hiding. Elsewhere, our protagonist remained blissfully unaware as he enjoyed a quiet morning. He and Arya strolled through the town, taking a moment to appreciate the perfect weather. He remarks that it's the perfect day to tackle some chores, a sentiment that Arya finds quite amusing. He questioned why she would choose to accompany him on such a mundane and unrewarding task. She shared her ambition of becoming an adventurer dedicated to assisting everyone in the community. Bran was left in disbelief, realizing he had somehow become an unlikely role model for menial labor. He realized that Arya had grasped the true essence of adventuring from the very beginning. Upon reaching a farm, they were met by a friendly woman who welcomed them with a bright smile. She was delighted to see that two adventurers had agreed to take on her modest request. She guided the group toward the barn, detailing the specific task they needed to complete. Their mission led them to tend to a flock of remarkably energetic sheep. The task was straightforward: tidy up the barn while the sheep were out in the fields. Arya admitted to feeling a bit anxious, as she had never looked after an animal before. Bran's expression grew grim as he realized his animal curse was the true root of the problem. As he attempts to begin, he is instantly overwhelmed by the swarm of fluffy creatures. He directed Arya to go and retrieve the cleaning supplies for the barn. Nodding in agreement, she prepared to lead the flock out into the open pasture. However, Bran stops her, having noticed her momentary hesitation at the gate. She confessed her deep-seated fear of the fluffy creatures, admitting that she found them just as unsettling as snakes. He dismissed her with a wave, telling her to proceed while he went to gather the tools. Keeping her eyes tightly shut, Arya attempted to shoo the sheep away. However, the fluffy horde seemed entirely unmoved by her efforts. The farm owner and her daughter looked on, visibly perplexed by the sudden holdup. The sheep, however, seemed perfectly satisfied to simply spend their time napping. Arya decides to take a more direct approach and handle the matter personally. She exerted every ounce of her strength just to budge a single one of them. She was stunned to discover that it was as solid as a rock. The sheep turned toward her, its gaze filled with nothing but sheer irritation. A forceful kick sent the young girl hurtling through the air. Bran reacts instantly, catching her just before she hits the ground. Arya found herself thoroughly flustered by the unexpected rescue. Bran simply questioned her, asking what she was trying to accomplish. He offered her some reassurance as she stammered through an apology. He shifted his focus toward the flock, noting their unexpected persistence. He realized that these sheep were a unique brand of trouble. Arya was stunned, struggling to accept that she was being openly mocked by a farm animal. Bran informs her that he'll be taking over, though the news clearly leaves her feeling uneasy. He admitted he had been relying on her to take charge, given the complications of his animal curse. His expression darkened as he realized he was left with no other alternative. He addressed the gathered crowd, his voice carrying a cold and threatening undertone. A surge of intense pressure suddenly swept through the entire pen. With a single chilling command, he ordered them to leave immediately. Without warning, the sheep are gripped by an overwhelming sense of primal dread. In an instant, they were gripped by panic and stampeded out of the barn. The farm owner and her daughter could only watch in stunned silence. The entire flock scatters in a frantic rush, driven by a desperate need to survive. As the dust finally clears, it becomes apparent that the barn is now completely empty. Bran remained perfectly composed, leaving Arya staring at him in stunned silence. When she questioned how he pulled it off, he simply chalked it up to a bit of intimidation. He remarked that, against ordinary humans, this technique usually results in an immediate loss of consciousness. He began to suspect that his animal curse might be directly linked to the demon lord's heart. Arya quickly brought him back to his senses, ready to get their cleaning quest underway. She set to work with an unexpected burst of enthusiasm. Meanwhile, Bran could be found cleaning the ceiling while suspended upside down. Within moments, the entire barn had been rendered completely spotless. Their brief moment of satisfaction is quickly interrupted by the arrival of a new complication. Arya scrambled frantically, trying her best to usher the sheep back inside. However, the flock settled in for a nap, paying her no mind at all. She slumped over in defeat, finally admitting that acting intimidating was far more difficult than she expected. Bran stepped forward, and with a single command, he successfully ushered the sheep back into the barn. The farm owner's daughter gazed at him, her eyes now filled with genuine adoration. She even went as far as to ask him for lessons on his impressive intimidation techniques. The farm owner waved them off, clearly appreciative of the hard work they had contributed. When she asked if the sheep had been any trouble, Bran simply reassured her that they were good kids. However, the traumatized flock would likely have a very different perspective on the matter. Returning to the guild, Bran unexpectedly announces his intention to take a month-long leave of absence. The revelation left everyone in the vicinity, including the guild staff, in a state of complete shock. Arya couldn't shake the feeling that she was somehow responsible for his sudden decision to leave. Motivated by his example, she resolved to push herself even harder in her training. The guild staff member questioned why he hadn't filed any of the required paperwork before taking his vacation. Bran felt a wave of genuine confusion, as he hadn't anticipated this would be necessary. In his previous life, the simple concept of taking a day off was even more alien to him than the idea of failure. She clarified that as an adventurer, he has the liberty to take breaks at his own discretion. He made the decision to return to his hometown, a trek that would take him 2 weeks to complete. The Empire's name struck a chord, triggering a sudden recollection of his past life. The other adventurers have begun to notice that the Black Emperor has been uncharacteristically quiet lately. The guild worker inquired if he was enjoying his new life, and he confirmed that he was indeed satisfied. His companions voiced their envy, complaining that he was getting such an extended break. The guild worker simply chuckled, telling the group to make sure they brought back some souvenirs from their trip. After bidding farewell to his new companions, Bran set off on his journey. Back at the guild, one of Rena's colleagues manages to identify Bran as a citizen of the Radion Empire. She was puzzled as to why someone from such a powerful nation would choose to join their small-scale guild. Her friend pointed out that the Empire held the highest number of top-tier rankers, despite being known for its abundance of menial quests. Nevertheless, she found it peculiar that he would choose to register so far from his hometown. Her friend speculates that he might be concealing a dark and mysterious history. The co-worker then shifted the focus, accusing her friend of being the one truly interested in Bran. Stunned by the revelation, Rena's co-worker finally realized she had been manipulated from the very beginning. Her friend simply laughed, advising her to set her sights on someone with more ambition. Elsewhere, Bran sat beside a campfire, mindful of the sharp chill in the night air. He set out on a long trek, facing a 2-week journey ahead of him on foot. A kindly old man seated in a wagon hails the young traveler as he passes by. He cautions Bran that venturing down this road alone is a highly dangerous undertaking. Their discussion was abruptly cut short by a sudden, terrified scream. A stampede of monstrous boars barreled directly toward the defenseless family. Bran calmly positioned himself between the monsters and the wagon, treating the dangerous encounter as nothing more than a routine part of his day. In a single moment, the threat was neutralized and the beast was finally brought down. Grateful for his assistance, the family thanked him and offered a ride as a token of their appreciation. Bran politely declined the offer, opting to travel on foot this time instead. A young girl approaches him, offering a small pouch as a sincere gesture of her gratitude. He gestured a final farewell, looking on as the family safely resumed their travels. Curious about the small gift, he opened the pouch to see what was inside. The moment he took a bite, he was instantly struck by the exceptional flavor. He felt a brief flicker of regret for passing up their offer of a ride and additional snacks. Seeking to remain undetected, he opted for a shortcut through the mountain terrain. Stretching his limbs, he looked forward to a peaceful journey for two, though the identity of his companion remained a mystery. Unfortunately, his initial excitement for a peaceful stroll quickly began to diminish. He soon realized that he'd had more than enough of the wilderness to last him a lifetime. He quickened his pace, only to be brought to a sudden halt by what lay directly ahead. From his position in the trees, he suddenly detected an unusual, magical aura nearby. Letting out a frustrated sigh, he accepted that he had no other choice but to look into the situation. He immediately recognized the magic, noting its striking similarity to the barrier he had encountered in the sewers. However, this one was significantly weaker, posing almost no challenge at all. He scanned his surroundings, trying to identify the exact origin of the disturbance. Following the clues, he eventually discovered a concealed building that had fallen into complete disrepair. A nearby sentry catches sight of him, immediately mistaking him for an ordinary bandit. Bran listened from the shadows as they discussed their involvement with a sinister organization. One of the men was suddenly jolted by an unexpected sound. His companion turned to ask what was wrong, but the realization came far too late. Emerging from the darkness, Bran swiftly incapacitated the first guard before he could react. Startled by the abrupt thud, the hooded man quickly turned toward the sound. A perfectly aimed rock strikes him directly on the forehead. Bran followed through with a decisive kick, bringing the battle to a close. He let out a sigh, frustrated that he had acted far too impulsively. Allowing them to speak further would have been a better way to gather valuable intelligence. A sudden memory of a blood-stained blade flickered through his mind. He stared at the organization's emblem, feeling a wave of regret for his sloppy execution. Having dealt with the guards, he now stood directly in front of the hideout's main entrance. He sensed the presence of several people just beyond his current location. He also detected the faint auras of their captives hidden within the group. He realized that this mission was far beyond the capabilities of an ordinary adventurer. He reflected on his master's lessons regarding the importance of helping those in need. At the time, the true meaning of that lesson had completely eluded him. He adjusted his mask, now fully prepared to become the hero they needed. Inside, the bandits remained entirely unaware of the situation, far too absorbed in their rowdy celebrations to notice a thing. Within moments, the entire room had been reduced to a state of complete destruction. Surrounded by the unfolding chaos, Brand stood firm as he confronted their towering leader. His gaze turned icy as he finally reached the end of his patience. The creature was clearly another one of those hideous experiments, branded with the same familiar crest. He summoned a familiar volley of dark, piercing spears. He lunges forward, aiming to end the fight with a single, decisive strike. He managed to dodge the blow, visibly startled by the sudden resistance. He soon realized that this intruder was far more calculating than any ordinary monster. The bandits soon realized that a direct assault would only put their prisoners in harm's way. He decided that rescuing the hostages had to take priority over everything else. He could feel their presence lingering just on the other side of the reinforced door. A single, powerful kick was all it took for him to shatter the lock. However, the sight awaiting him inside leaves him utterly speechless. They discovered another secret laboratory, this one filled with unconscious victims. He discovered that they were being subjected to the same twisted experiments. The sight of the place stirred a familiar cold rage within him. Scanning the group of captives, he noticed children among them, whose lives had been stripped away. Without warning, a sharp, agonizing sensation surged through his head. Suddenly, he finds himself overwhelmed by a surge of memories that don't belong to him. A voice echoed in his mind, bringing with it a memory that didn't belong to him. The sheer force of the psychic backlash drove him straight to his knees. Gasping for breath, he struggled to process the meaning of the vision he had just witnessed. He was left questioning the true nature of that bizarre occurrence. He began to doubt whether the memories surfacing in his mind were truly his own. His thoughts drifted to his master, the singular connection to the only history he had ever known. He quickly brushed the feeling aside, knowing he couldn't afford to dwell on a personal crisis. With his duty in mind, he turned his attention toward the captives. Standing before the cage of children, he assured them that he had come to help. With a single decisive blow, he completely shattered the prison bars. Their profound despair soon gave way to tears of overwhelming relief. Bran looked on, his expression completely obscured by his mask. He urged them to quicken their pace, guiding the group out of the darkened laboratory. However, one of the girls gestured toward the rest of the victims. His expression grew stern as he turned his attention toward the others. He understood the silent appeal in her eyes, urging him to save everyone. He understood that leaving anyone behind in a place like this was simply out of the question. He leaned down to gently close the eyes of the fallen victim. He offered a silent prayer, wishing for their souls to finally rest in peace. The rescued children were left in tears, overwhelmed by the sheer horror of their ordeal. He urged them to depart quickly, warning that the bandits would soon return. Unfortunately, time had already run out, and their captors were now upon them. He urged the group to trust him, assuring them that he would take care of the situation. They explained that they were always transported while blindfolded, leaving them completely unaware of their current location. One of the prisoners grew increasingly concerned for the safety of their companion. The young boy quickly reassured the group that he hadn't sustained any physical injuries. Bran's keen senses allowed him to immediately perceive the boy's current state. He questioned how he could know such things without asking, realizing that his ability was becoming increasingly strange. The bandits shouted into the area, demanding that the intruder reveal themselves. Brand was overcome with a wave of nausea as he reflected on the crimes he had committed. The bandits stood poised for action, their expressions etched with cold-hearted malice. He gripped his chest, suddenly overwhelmed by an unfamiliar sensation. The leader taunted him, openly mocking his idealistic sense of justice. Brand's eyes narrowed, his gaze sharpened by a cold and simmering fury. The man warned him not to get in the way of their amusement. He ridiculed Bran, calling him a fool for daring to venture into the area completely alone. Though they mocked his lack of words, the fight was over in an instant, proving their lengthy monologues were a grave mistake. He seized the leader by the throat, demanding an explanation of what they truly were. Standing amidst the devastation, he questioned what kind of place he had found himself in. Overwhelmed by fear, the bandit could do nothing but let out a terrified scream. Bran towered over him, his shadow casting an imposing presence as he pressed for answers. The man contorts in pain, yet Bran remains completely unwavering. He repeated the question, his tone remaining cold and entirely unforgiving. His eyes blazed with fury as he sternly demanded an honest explanation. Feigning ignorance, the bandit insisted he was merely following his superior's orders. Another individual clarified that they were merely pawns who had been granted power in exchange for their service. Bran listened in silence, and though his face remained unreadable, his mounting anger was unmistakable. Insisting he was merely a disposable tool, the bandit claimed to have no knowledge of the actual plan. His train of thought is suddenly interrupted by a soft voice calling from the doorway. He looked back at the rescued survivors, who were clearly bewildered by the recent turn of events. Pointing toward the fallen leader, they identified him as the one responsible for their suffering. Their fear soon hardened into resentment as they began to hold him responsible for everything they had lost. Bran announced that his involvement had come to an end, leaving the next steps entirely in their hands. Despite the bandit's desperate pleas, no mercy would be granted. His desperate pleas fell on deaf ears as he was finally held accountable for his actions. Bran closed the door behind him, leaving the others to carry out their grim but essential task. He redirected his focus to the children, carefully assessing their well-being. He noted that, given enough time, they should be able to make a complete recovery. However, he remained concerned about any potential side effects the experiments might have caused. He questioned whether this sudden clarity was simply another extension of his power. He decided to leave the more intricate problems for his master to handle. As the immediate danger subsided, he turned his attention toward the remaining survivors. With no home left to return to, one of the women questioned what their next move would be. Left without money, family, or a place to call home, they found themselves with nowhere left to turn. The children slept soundly, completely unaware of the precarious future awaiting them. Bran suggests a solution, offering to lead the group safely to the nearest city. His sudden display of kindness catches her completely off guard. Before long, the city's perimeter walls began to emerge on the horizon. Their deep-seated despair finally gave way to tears of overwhelming joy. With his mission complete, he offered a silent farewell from a distance. With his detour finally concluded, he turned to take his leave. A genuine smile finally touched his lips as he realized the true satisfaction of helping others. However, his progress is being closely monitored by an unseen figure lurking in the shadows. An enigmatic figure suddenly picked up on a presence that felt strangely nostalgic. A warm smile crossed his face, clearly pleased to see that Bran was doing well. Upon their return to the city, the rescued children were finally provided with the care they needed. Deeply thankful for their survival, the group began to recount the story of their ordeal. As the local lord reviewed the case, he noted that the circumstances were quite peculiar. Medical personnel soon confirmed that the survivors were in stable condition and expected to make a full recovery. However, he admitted that he was unable to identify the mysterious drugs that had been used on them. The Lord reflected on the mystery, his unease mounting as he processed each troubling detail. He questioned the survivors to see if they remembered anything about the person who had saved them. All they can remember is a mysterious hooded figure who appeared to know the path ahead. One of the women remarked that their hero appeared to have lost his way while heading back. As the Lord's frustration mounted, the story began to fall apart, especially since a mysterious benefactor couldn't be used as the basis for a legitimate police report. Recognizing that he was only further distressing the survivors, he stopped to offer a sincere apology. He concludes that the person who saved them could only be a high-ranking adventurer. He was eager to cross paths with a warrior of such high caliber. He reassures the survivors, promising that they will be well provided for within his city. Overwhelmed by his kindness, they expressed their sincere gratitude for his generosity. Left to his own thoughts, he theorized that the bandits had been utilizing teleportation magic. Recognizing the gravity of the situation, he knew he had to report the incident to the capital immediately. The story transitions to the Black Forest, a region widely feared for its lethal reputation. As Bran made his way through the woods, he was struck by a deep sense of nostalgia. He recalled the rigorous training he had endured in this place under his master's guidance. It was within this forest that he sharpened his instincts, learning to anticipate danger before it could reach him. Now the tables have turned, and he finds himself standing his ground against a massive swarm of monsters. He came to a brief halt, instinctively sensing that something was out of place. With the beast finally defeated, he immediately sensed an unwelcome presence lingering nearby. From a distance, he noticed two figures keeping a watchful eye on his master's residence. He let out a sigh, realizing they were likely spies dispatched by the guild. He remained certain that his master would never compromise his location. To bypass the unnecessary trouble, he opted for a shortcut instead. His journey leads him through the heart of some ancient, long-abandoned ruins. He observed that the area was eerily still, noting the complete absence of any monsters. He looked up, his attention caught by something far off in the distance. He caught sight of a massive statue, signaling that his search was finally over. Standing before the statue, he took a moment to recall how the entrance mechanism functioned. He let out a grunt of exertion as he slid his blade into a concealed slot. Treating the blade like a key, he carefully rotated it through a precise sequence. The mechanism locked into position, clicking together with a perfect and familiar fit. A low rumble shakes the ground as a section of the floor begins to sink. A concealed flight of stairs was revealed, leading deep into the shadows below. As he stepped inside, his sheathed sword began to emit a soft, steady glow. He observed the magical stones illuminating the corridor, noting how practical they were for a secret lair. He paused in his tracks, picking up on a sudden shift in the atmosphere. His eyes widened in shock as a sudden blur lunged toward him. A powerful, unseen strike suddenly sent him flying through the air. The impact was powerful enough to completely shatter the wall where he had been standing just a moment ago. He got back to his feet, frustrated that the attack had managed to slip past his senses. A figure stepped out from the shadows, offering him a casual greeting. His former companion, an elf-like man, appeared before him with a smug expression. Bran stood paralyzed in shock as he recognized his other master.